reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org.
Hello, this is Kathy, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the August 9th issue of the front section of the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. For more college graduates, moving home is a no-brainer, by Noam Scheiber. When he hadn't landed a job a few months after graduating from the University of California, Santa Cruz, 2 years ago, Tommy Balmat moved back to his childhood home in the San Francisco Bay Area. He figured looking for a job would be easier with fewer expenses to shoulder. And, perhaps no less important, he was still close with his parents, who were keen to have him back. I communicate with my parents about every thought that goes through my head, said Mr. Balmat, who majored in literature and anthropology and had hoped for a job in book publishing. They honestly really encouraged me to come back home if that's what I wanted. Mr. Balmat is hardly the only recent graduate to have accepted such an invitation lately. Data from the economists Stefania Albanese, Rania Gileb, and Ning Zhang show that the portion of college graduates ages 23 to 27 living with their parents has returned to the high it reached during the COVID-19 epidemic. More than one quarter did so as of last year, from a low of about 18% in 2001. According to updates to the paper that are not yet online. The fact that so many young adults are living at home reflects persistent weaknesses in the job market for recent graduates, even as the overall economy remains fairly strong. The weakness may be growing as artificial intelligence affects white-collar jobs. Still, some experts wonder if it is all bad news. College graduates may be moving home because they recognize the benefits of conducting a job search from the relative comfort of their childhood bedroom, and, as in Mr. Balmat's case, they're no longer discouraged by social norms from taking advantage of that arrangement. Smartphones and video calls have meant that going off to college no longer requires cutting the cord with one's mother or father, making re-entry less jarring to both parent and child. And huge social disruptions like the Great Recession and the pandemic left many young adults with no alternatives, lessening the stigma. This recognition of broader influences doesn't eliminate frustration with one's current lot, said Daniel Holland, a therapist in Bloomington, Minnesota, who works with many recent college graduates living with their parents. But it has resulted in what I see as less shame and guilt regarding moving back home. It's hard to deny that a shortage of good jobs has helped drive the great graduate homecoming, even as other economic forces, like the high cost of housing, have also weighed on those just starting out. Over the past decade, young adults with bachelor's degrees have become more likely to live at home, while those with only a high school diploma become slightly less likely to do so, Dr. Albanese has found. Both groups face rising housing costs, but their economic trajectories have diverged. People with less education appear to have made strong gains since the pandemic, while the college-educated have stalled out. The unemployment rate for recent college graduates has increased much more rapidly than the country's overall unemployment rate over the past 4 years, to 5.7% in the second quarter of this year, according to the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. Even graduates in some traditionally lucrative fields have felt the effects. A chemical engineer who had graduated from McGill University in Montreal moved in with their parents in April and said she and many of her classmates have not found jobs in the field. The unemployment rate for chemical engineers who recently graduated more than doubled between 2022 and 2024 to 4.7%, while the rate for computer engineers more than tripled to 7.8%, according to data from the bank. Such challenges may be altering the profile of those who live at home after graduation, from the rudderless to the driven but thwarted. Allison Yoho assumed that an economics degree from the University of Minnesota, along with solid internship experience, would put her in a strong position to line up a job right out of school. and she moved quickly to capitalize on these advantages. During the fall of her senior year, she prepared to apply for an early career program at a clean energy firm where she had worked the previous summer. But in a change from past years, the firm did not appear to solicit applications for the program. A few months before graduation in 2025, while having coffee with a former supervisor, she learned that the company had recently gone through layoffs. That should have been the first clue it would be an uphill battle, Ms. Yoho recalled. She moved home to a suburb in the Twin Cities last August and got her first offer in October. She wasn't thrilled about the job and felt confident enough to keep searching for a better fit, which materialized 2 months later. The findings of Dr. Albanese and her co-authors suggest that Ms. Yoho will be less likely to take an earnings hit by age 27 than others who struggle to find a job out of school because she could afford to be choosier during her search. Other data suggests that recent graduates are opting to live at home while searching for a job even if they might be able to land a worse job sooner, perhaps because they feel more comfortable doing so. According to the New York Fed, the underemployment rate, the portion of college graduates taking jobs that don't require a degree, has been relatively low in recent years. Lawrence Katz, a labor economist at Harvard, cautioned that such data is inexact and difficult to interpret. But Dr. Katz acknowledged that shifting norms might help explain why more young people were living at home. Is there some cultural change in the way people see parenting? He said. You see kids today in the degree to which they're interacting with parents that's completely different than the world of 50 years ago, 25 years ago. The sheer number of people moving home after graduation and the sense that they are up against economic forces beyond their control also appears to be normalizing the choice and weakening whatever taboo might have once existed. Betsy Ballmat, Tommy's mother, said she had observed fewer and fewer recent college graduates living on their own, at least in the Bay Area, where rent is especially high. I can say from my own social circle of people I work with and know that it is more common than not to have kids moving home, said Ms. Ballmat, an assistant school superintendent. When Lily Del Era moved home to Sacramento last year after graduating from the University of Washington, she found it comforting that many high school friends were in a similar position. They even began meeting on weekends for group activities, like going on a run or to the farmer's market. I don't feel bad about moving home, said Miss Del Era, who majored in oceanography and is hoping to become a veterinarian. All my other friends are doing it. The transition is rarely frictionless, of course. A recent graduate of Syracuse University said she was sharing a bunk bed with her younger sister and complained that her mother insisted on tracking her location on her phone, which made her feel like a teenager again. Mr. Ballmat said he felt a little pressure from his parents to get a lot of applications out the door, sometimes to the detriment of their quality. He was applying to jobs just to say I had done it, he recalled. But overall, the experience has been a positive one, he said, allowing him to save enough money to move in with a college friend later this month. He does not appear to have suffered much stigma from living at home, and for several months even dated a woman he had met at a cafe where he worked part-time to burn off anxious energy. We ended up bonding really hard. We're both writers, said Mr. Ballmat, who hopes to publish a novel someday. We were both really passionate about what we were doing, struggling to figure out how to turn it into money. When he invited his girlfriend over to hang out, the attention from his parents was sometimes embarrassing. They would both drop in on us as if we were watching a movie on the couch, to be like, "Can I get anybody any snacks?" But his girlfriend took it in stride. It turned out she had moved back home too. President gains loyal guardian at Justice Department by Glenn Thrush, Washington. The three lame duck Republican senators who narrowly saved Todd Blanche's confirmation as Attorney General ended up backing him because they believed he was the only person who had earned enough trust and enjoyed enough access to rein in President Trump. One issue with that calculation: Mr. Blanche is a champion of unbridled presidential power. Time and again during his turbulent nomination process, Mr. Blanche made it unmistakably clear that he believes Mr. Trump possesses a nearly limitless right to directly control the actions of the Justice Department under Article 2 of the Constitution. It is an argument that formed the foundation of his strategy as the president's criminal defense lawyer and is the lodestar of his government service. Mr. Blanche's confirmation in the pre-dawn hours on Saturday was largely symbolic. As acting attorney general, he could have served indefinitely. But it represented a powerful endorsement by Congress of the philosophy that has guided him under a meddling, demanding boss, that he has a constitutional obligation to execute every lawful White House order, even if it shutters long-standing policy and rule of law norms, or contradicts what he thinks is right. He articulated that view from the moment he took over as acting attorney general in April, telling reporters that Mr. Trump had the right and duty to order up investigations of people he targets. During his confirmation, both in public and in private conversations, Mr. Blanche sidestepped questions over whether actions Mr. Trump ordered were right, saying only that Mr. Trump had the right to do them. Barbara McQuaid, a University of Michigan Law School professor and former federal prosecutor, said this marked a major break from past administrations. Just because a president can control the Justice Department does not mean he should, she said. Since Watergate, America has prized a Justice Department that is independent from partisan politics. While Mr. Trump and allies like Mr. Blanche have repeatedly accused the Biden White House of ordering up prosecutorial hit jobs against Republicans, they have provided little evidence to support the kind of direct interventions that have become commonplace in Mr. Trump's second term. In a recent interview, former President Barack Obama said he followed a broad rule of remaining at a distance from the Justice Department to protect its independence, even though he was not legally required to do so. The White House shouldn't be able to direct the Attorney General to go around prosecuting whoever the president wants to prosecute, he said. The idea is that the Attorney General is the people's lawyer. It's not the president's consigliere. Mr. Trump has a different view. Case in point, late Monday, he browbeat Jeanine Pirro, the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, for withdrawing the indictment of a man accused of defacing the reflecting pool. While the melodramatic showdown was big news, the fact that the president was issuing marching orders to a federal prosecutor was so typical under this administration, it was not noted in most of the coverage. During his confirmation hearing, Senator Chris Coons, Democrat of Delaware, asked Mr. Blanche whether the department he was running is independent from the White House. Mr. Blanche's reply, Article 11 of the Constitution gives the power of the executive to President Trump. When Mr. Coons followed up by asking if he would resign if Mr. Trump asked him to do something illegal or unethical, Mr. Blanche said, "That will never happen. But yes, if it were to happen, I'm not going to violate my oath to the Constitution." Mr. Blanche shares Mr. Trump's view that the landmark 2024 Supreme Court ruling that granted Mr. Trump sweeping immunity from prosecution represents a broader endorsement of expanded presidential authority. Todd Blanche has lived firsthand the expansion of executive power by the Supreme Court and Trump, said John P. Fishwick, Jr., who served as U.S. Attorney for the Western District of Virginia under Mr. Obama. Look for DOJ to aggressively protect this muscular executive power. While many Republicans raised questions about Mr. Blanche's actions and even his independence during his confirmation, few were willing to withhold or even leverage their votes to challenge the boss-employee dynamic that Mr. Trump has opposed on this department. Ultimately, decisions are made by the president, said Senator Bill Cassidy, Republican of Louisiana, who announced in a floor speech Friday that he would deliver the decisive vote for Mr. Blanche's confirmation. The advisor Mr. Cassidy consulted before making up his mind was notable. During his speech, he quoted extensively from conversations with William P. Barr, Mr. Trump's Attorney General in his first term, who articulated an expansive view of presidential power in a 2018 memo. Mr. Barr quit 2 years later when pressured by Mr. Trump to help undermine confidence in the 2020 election. Mr. Barr counseled Mr. Cassidy to support Mr. Blanche in the belief that he could quietly talk the president out of bad ideas, even though Mr. Barr quit rather than comply with Mr. Trump's demands to investigate an election Mr. Barr found had been fairly conducted. Mr. Blanche's experience as Mr. Trump's private lawyer was not a reason to oppose him, Mr. Barr told Mr. Cassidy, but an asset. It gave Mr. Blanche the capacity to have tough conversations and confront Mr. Trump with difficult truths that could change his mind, Mr. Barr said to him. Not every Republican bought into this job description of an attorney general. 2 Republican women, Senator Susan Collins of Maine and Senator Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, said they would vote no on Mr. Blanche precisely because he had been unwilling to speak truth to Mr. Trump's power or have enough tough conversations with him. Ms. Collins, the first Republican to oppose Ms. Blanche, said he had taken several actions that have further eroded the department's independence, including his sign-off of tax protections for the president and his family and the attempted indictments of Democratic lawmakers who criticized Mr. Trump. Early Friday, Ms. Murkowski, a consistent and plain-spoken Republican critic of Mr. Trump, described her no vote as a moment of major historic consequence, an opportunity to both demonstrate the chamber's dissatisfaction with Mr. Blanche's obeisance and reclaim the Senate's authority to influence the department's direction. The country needs an attorney general who will check the worst impulses of this administration, Ms. Murkowski said on Friday. I hope Mr. Blanche is able to achieve that if confirmed, but I simply do not have the confidence that that will be the case. Shortly after, Mr. Cassidy took to the floor to offer Mr. Blanche his support. The floor fight over Mr. Blanche was preceded by a clash in the Senate Judiciary Committee that followed a similar trajectory. 2 lame duck senators, John Cornyn of Texas and Thom Tillis of North Carolina, briefly withheld their support on the Senate Judiciary Committee over Mr. Blanche's role in a deal to resolve Mr. Trump's lawsuit against the IRS. The ensuing agreement created a $1.8 billion fund to compensate purported victims of Biden-era abuses at the department and granted Mr. Trump sweeping immunity from tax investigations. Both made it clear from the start they liked Mr. Blanche and did not consider his reluctance to challenge Mr. Trump to be disqualifying. They simply wanted him to put in writing his verbal commitment to kill the fund and to include modest limits on the tax provision. Mr. Blanche was amenable, but the White House resisted, and Mr. Trump threatened to temporarily withdraw Mr. Blanche's nomination until the 2 lawmakers were out of office. The president eventually relented, clearing the way for a vote on the floor. But the episode underscored, in the view of critics, the lopsided power dynamic inherent in the partnership between Mr. Trump and Mr. Blanche. Mr. Cornyn expressed broader concerns about Mr. Blanche's independence during a confirmation hearing last month, echoing Ms. Murkowski's statements. But he did not withhold his vote to make the larger point, as she did, and confined his final senatorial stand to a narrower patch of ground, obtaining written assurances over the agreement that emerged from the IRS suit. After the Senate committee advanced Mr. Blanche's nomination, Mr. Cornyn conceded that Mr. Trump, resentful of being forced to make even a modest accommodation, might backtrack on the agreement after he retired. There's nothing we could do to rein in the president when he said he likes the fund and wishes that it still exists. But the fact of the matter is, it's dead, and that's all we could do under the circumstances, he told reporters. Senators passed bill to head off shutdown by Katie Edmondson. Washington. The Senate on Saturday passed a stopgap spending bill to avert a government shutdown at the end of September in a bipartisan effort to head off a major skirmish before the midterm elections. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the front section of the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The vote was 90-6, with 1 senator voting present, to keep federal funding flowing at current levels through December 11th and bar the Trump administration from transferring funds to the Border Patrol, a provision that Democrats had insisted on. It was unclear whether the agreement could pass the House, though lawmakers there are also eager to avoid a shutdown fight before November. The bill also would delay for a month a ban on intoxicating hemp products that is scheduled to go into effect in November, a provision inserted at President Trump's request that generated a minor revolt and briefly threatened to derail the entire bill. The passage of the interim spending legislation, more than a month before the September 30th shutdown deadline, was a departure from the last-minute buzzer-beater funding votes that have become the norm in Congress. This time, both the political impetus of the midterm elections and the bitter experience of two previous government shutdowns over the past year incentivized senators to move quickly, clearing the way for a nearly painless passage. After 3 unnecessary lapses in funding during the fiscal year 2026 cycle, putting the possibility of yet another harmful shutdown off the table should be a priority for each and every one of us, said Senator Susan Collins, Republican of Maine and chairwoman of the Appropriations Committee. Democrats celebrated the provision that sought to prevent the Trump administration from redirecting funding to Border Patrol, a measure that was at the heart of the last shutdown. This is an important step forward to prevent a shutdown no one wants and provide the runway we need to negotiate funding bills in the months ahead as we fight to rein in Trump's corruption and make life more affordable for families back home, said Senator Patty Murray of Washington, the top Democrat on the Appropriations Committee. The Senate defeated a bid by a group of Republican senators to strip the delay of the ban on intoxicating hemp products from the bill. Heading off the restrictions, which Congress approved and Mr. Trump signed into law last year, would benefit the son-in-law of Susie Wiles, Mr. Trump's chief of staff, who is the chief executive of companies that distribute and sell intoxicating hemp-derived gummies and vapes. The provision created a temporary speed bump in the Senate's consideration of the funding bill after Republican leaders, at the behest of the White House, tucked it into stopgap legislation. Critics argued that the ban was urgently needed to take aim at a multi-billion-dollar industry of beverages, gummies, cookies, and vapes that are sold in gas stations, vape shops, and convenience stores that are not regulated like cannabis dispensaries. It's no accident that these products are made to look exactly like something that a kid would want, Senator Ted Budd, Republican of North Carolina, said in arguing for allowing the ban to take effect as scheduled. He warned that the hemp industry was seeking to permanently entrench their intoxicating products into the machinery of government. But the administration defended the move as one that would help veterans and patients with pain management, and senators voted 61 to 32 to kill the proposal to remove the delay from the bill. Canada offers U.S. concessions in trade plan by Ian Austin, Ottawa. Canada has offered the Trump administration a package of trade proposals in hopes of preventing 50% tariffs that the United States plans to impose in less than 2 weeks, according to 2 people familiar with Canada's stance in the talks with Washington. The government of Prime Minister Mark Carney is offering a specific concessions, including repealing a tariff on U.S.-made autos introduced in retaliation for a similar U.S. measure, according to the 2 people who were briefed on the negotiations. The Canadian government hopes to significantly lower current tariffs and has stressed that it will not agree to a piecemeal arrangement, according to the 2 people who asked not to be named discussing confidential matters. Speaking to reporters in Quebec on Thursday, Mr. Carney ruled out doing deals just on specific irritants. "We're not interested in a very targeted deal," he said. "We're interested in a more comprehensive deal, more global deal." After months with little discussion between the 2 countries, meetings resumed last week in Washington and have at times included Jameson Greer, the United States Trade Representative, and Dominic LeBlanc, the Canadian cabinet minister responsible for trade with the United States. Mr. Trump signed an executive order which, if it goes into effect as planned on August 19th, will cover a vast array of Canadian exports, including alcohol. It will not affect oil, natural gas, the fertilizer potash, and other natural resources used by American industry. As detailed trade discussions between our two countries are ongoing, we will not comment on specifics, said Gabriel Brunet, Mr. LeBlanc's spokesman, in a statement. Canada's objective remains to reach a comprehensive deal that addresses sectoral tariffs and benefits Canadian workers, farmers, and businesses. After months of little contact, the two sides have been actively engaged over the last 2 weeks and are treating August 19th as a serious deadline, the people familiar with the talks said. Canada is pressing Washington to drop plans for tariffs on $20 billion worth of Canadian exports and reduce current tariffs of up to 50% on Canadian steel, aluminum, and autos. Two people said. Canada also wants Washington to commit to renewing the free trade agreement between Canada, the United States, and Mexico. Contrary to some Canadian media reports, the country's negotiators have not offered to return American wine and spirits to the shelves of government-owned provincial liquor stores, according to one of the people briefed. Mr. Carney has no control over the move, which Mr. Trump has cited as a reason for his latest tariffs. Instead, the Canadians have told their American counterparts that the boycott by 8 of Canada's 10 provinces will only end if Mr. Carney can present those governments with a satisfactory trade deal, the two people said. That condition has also been attached to resolving American complaints that the provinces discriminate against U.S. companies when awarding contracts. Canada will not sign any agreement that doesn't address tariffs on the car industry, a major employer in Ontario, the most populous province, one of the people said. The Canadian package includes measures to ensure the supply of critical minerals from Canada to the United States, as well as cooperation on energy and defense, one of the people briefed said. The latter may include Canadian participation in Mr. Trump's proposed Golden Dome missile defense system. Canada is also willing to discuss how it allocates quotas that allow American farmers and dairies to ship duty-free to Canada, another of Mr. Trump's recent complaints, according to one of the people. The package of proposals is broadly similar to one Canada presented last October, according to one of the people familiar with the talks. The United States withdrew from negotiations after Ontario aired ads on American television featuring clips of President Ronald Reagan denouncing tariffs. Canada is looking for a political agreement rather than a formal trade treaty with the U.S. administration, one of the people said. Not only would that not require congressional approval, he said, but it would be much easier to amend under a future administration. Boorish Yet Beloved. Is a Roadside Relic Worth Saving? By Eduardo Medina, Dillon, South Carolina. On a long, long highway, right where one land turns into another, a place called South of the Border has welcomed weary travelers for generations, beckoning them with a towering neon-lit sombrero. Underneath its brim, cheap motel rooms and restaurants serving burritos, tacos, and margaritas. The border in question is the one between North and South Carolina, and the approximation of Mexican culture that the rest stop offers has the feel of a Speedy Gonzales cartoon, or if Willy Wonka decorated for Cinco de Mayo. What is this place? Steve Crenshaw recalled asking his friend in the 1970s when he first visited. Now he was there again, lured by nostalgia. Indeed, South of the Border in Dillon, South Carolina, is a relic of American road travel, echoing mid-century highway oddities like Wall Drug in South Dakota and the world's largest of just about anything across the Midwest. It harks back to a different time in the South, before the region diversified and exploded in growth. Now, authentic Latin American spots abound, as do popular chains like Buc-ee's and Wawa, adding to the many challenges for the aging attraction. And at a time when the country is mired in debates over immigration and identity, the kitschy Mexican aesthetic that South of the Border embraced in its early years feels culturally fraught. The business challenges have recently taken on more urgency for the owner, Ryan Schaefer. He has offers to sell the entire place and spare him the headaches from people who ridicule it online as a haunting past that stays frozen in time. But then he considers his grandfather, Alan, who opened the rest stop in 1949 and died in 2001. Some days I want to cash out, go live on a beach in Mexico and open something small out there, said Mr. Schaefer, 49. But it's also kind of a family member. You're supposed to take care of it. You're supposed to honor it. South of the border, which spans more than 200 acres, does not fit neatly into one motif. There's Pedro, the stereotypical mustachioed mascot, peppered all over the place. Pedro statues, Pedro bags, Pedro Taco Tuesday, t-shirts, Pedro baseballs. But there are also sculptures of dinosaurs and sombreros, a fireworks store, a motocross training facility, and enough alligators in a reptile exhibit to impress Floridian visitors. Is the owner Mexican? No. Was the attraction built for fans of Disney World on their way to Orlando? It predates that theme park, as well as construction of I-95. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the front section of the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. It's like a Mexican wonderland, Vincent Toigo, 27, who is of Portuguese descent, told his family as they perused Pedro's Mexico shop, spotting a Dia de Muertos art. His grandmother visited in the 1950s. His mother, Margaret, first visited in the 80s when she said it was more run down. Did her children think that description held up? That's part of it, said her daughter, Mercedes Toigo, 29, who derided Buc-ee's as too cookie-cutter. This has character. Mr. Schaefer believes that character is worth preserving, but it is getting harder. At one point, south of the border's restaurant division alone had 350 employees. Today, the entire business has about 180, and Mr. Schaefer has struggled to find workers. One of the restaurants, the Hot Tamale, burned down in April and will not be rebuilt. The attraction is also downsized, recently dropping its small theme park. About 30 acres of the complex are listed for sale for $2.85 million. Online, some falsely claim that the alligators are fake or that room 305 in the motel is haunted. Some of our businesses I understand very well and don't mind running them, Mr. Schaefer said. Others, he added, might as well have instructions in another language. South of the border opened at a time when North Carolina banned selling beer in stores. Mr. Schaefer's grandfather believed a beer stand right below the state line would do well. Business boomed. Over time, he introduced food and lodging and adopted the Mexican theme. Mr. Schaefer retells stories from his grandfather of how the Ku Klux Klan burned crosses in the family's front yard because they were Jewish and refused to segregate their establishment during Jim Crow. Alan met the Klansmen armed with a rifle and told them to go away, Alan Schaefer's niece wrote in an essay. To me, that is a mitzvah on steroids. Over the years, some have found aspects of south of the border problematic. The mascot was named after Mexican men who worked at the attraction decades ago and whom visitors called Pedro, no matter their real names. Alan Schaefer once recalled that the Mexican embassy had complained that the attraction was spreading ethnic stereotypes. A book about consumer culture in the South captured how Alan faced criticism in the 1980s for having billboards that parodied Hispanic accents. He changed them, he said at the time, because baby boomers do not have a sense of humor. Rosa Grivala, 30, who was Mexican-American, recently visited after her family was intrigued by the sight of a towering neon Pedro statue. I do think it's offensive, she said of the theme, standing underneath the mascot's arched legs that straddle the road. But such caricatures, she added, don't really bother me. Ryan Schaefer, whose politics skew left, says he sees the aesthetic as celebratory. He says he has visited Mexico multiple times, handpicking items to bring back to his business, like pottery and piñatas. and he speaks highly of hard-working immigrants in America, saying he wished they had a pathway to legal citizenship. Most of the people who visit south of the border aren't familiar with its history. All they know is that its tacky charm is still intact. It's kind of like going back to visit where you grew up, said Emmeline Figueroa as she buckled in her 2 children to hit the road again. The family had just purchased sombreros. Pam Oxendine, 65, has been working at the rest stop for 50 years. She said Mr. Schaefer had once told her that when all of us old folks are gone, he's going to close it. Lots of things change, she said, opening an old brochure that included a photo of Mr. Schaefer as a boy with his family, but we're still holding on. Earlier this summer, as Claudia Gray was traveling from Connecticut to Florida along I-95, she told her husband about a strange pit shop she had visited decades ago featuring dozens of odd billboards. Suddenly, they spotted one such billboard declaring, "You never sausage a place." "Oh my gosh," she said, "it's still here." Of course, they pulled over. An ICE detention center roils a tiny town and jolts a house race, by Jack Healy, Hudson, Colorado. After the Pledge of Allegiance and a discussion of food truck regulations, the town councilors in Hudson, Colorado reached the hard part of their weekly meeting. Getting yelled at by dozens of protesters, furious about an immigration detention center set to open in an empty prison on the edge of town. "You're Nazis!" Several members of the crowd shouted, waving anti-ICE posters. "Shame! Shame!" The protesters had driven from blue cities along Colorado's Front Range to fill the town hall in Hudson, a town of 1,600 with one stoplight and no grocery store that sits in a sea of farmland and oil and gas operations in northern Colorado. It is just a 45-minute drive from Denver, but in a different political universe, where residents voted overwhelmingly for President Trump. Until recently, Hudson was mostly known as a speed trap, but the arrival of an immigration and customs enforcement facility has plunged the town into one of the country's most divisive debates and jolted the re-election campaign of one of the most vulnerable Republicans in Congress. The detention center will sit along the border of Colorado's 8th Congressional District, a heavily Latino district served by Representative Gabe Evans, a Trump stalwart who ousted a Democrat 2 years ago. Now Democrats are hoping they can capitalize on growing anger over the high cost of living and Mr. Trump's deportation campaign to retake the district and reclaim control of Congress. Mr. Evans has expressed support for immigration detention centers, while his Democratic challenger, Manny Rutinel, a progressive state lawmaker, is campaigning on a pledge to stop ICE from terrorizing our communities. When it opens, as early as next month, the Bighorn Detention Center in Hudson could vastly expand immigration enforcement in a corner of Colorado where immigrants from across the world work in meatpacking plants and fields. It would nearly double Colorado's immigrant detention capacity, and opponents say it would sow fear across the plains. Diana and Ernesto Cruz, who live in nearby Fort Lupton, voted Republican in 2024 after being fed up with inflation and scenes of chaos along the southern border during the Biden administration. But they said Mr. Trump's immigration crackdown had gone too far, and they did not want an ICE detention center down the road. They are planning to vote for Mr. Rutinel in November. "There are more important things," Mr. Cruz said on Wednesday as he parked his big rig truck outside the couple's American flag-draped home. Late last year, protesters rallied outside Mr. Evans' district office in Greeley to urge him not to support the detention center. A spokeswoman for Mr. Evans declined a request to discuss the issue. Conservatives in Mr. Evans' district said they welcomed the prospect of more immigration enforcement in Colorado, a Democratic-led state that the Trump administration has attacked for its sanctuary policies. They've also argued that the detention center would create jobs and revive a prison that has sat empty for more than a decade. "It's just sitting there," said Denise Geddes, a nurse's aide in Fort Lupton, who described herself as big-time MAGA. Unauthorized immigrants, she said, are taking over the system. We're going to scoop your butt up, she continued. The GEO Group, one of the country's largest private prison companies, has a $529 million contract to run the facility and is already advertising for security officers starting at $35 an hour and other support staff. On Wednesday, a few pickup trucks came and went from the property, but there was no sign that any detainees had arrived. Neither the GEO Group nor ICE responded to questions for comment. Hudson's leaders insist they are powerless to stop the center. Bryce Lang, the town manager, said the prison had been approved by town voters years ago and that it still had a certificate of occupancy, even though it has sat empty for more than a decade. We're very limited in our abilities to do anything, Mr. Lang said. It's already built. The prison building is owned by Highlands REIT, a Chicago-based real estate investment trust, which did not respond to requests for comment. The town's inaction has only fueled protesters' frustration. Opponents of the prison sued Hudson last month, arguing the building size is not zoned for an immigration detention center. The suit says the facility could strain Hudson's water systems, roads, and emergency services by housing as many as 1,200 detainees in a remote facility 12 miles from the nearest hospital. The town has thrown up its hands and claimed it does not have the authority to act. That is a lie, said David Seligman, executive director of the progressive legal nonprofit Towards Justice, which sued Hudson on behalf of a faith group and a neighbor near the facility. Dozens of protesters regularly flock to Hudson to march through the streets and demonstrate in the dusty field outside Town Hall. Thousands of people have deluged the town with angry written comments. It's against every fiber of my being, said Barbara Mills Bria, a retired engineer who drove from suburban Houston to Hudson with two friends to attend a raucous council meeting on Wednesday. A brass band strutted through a quiet neighborhood as organizers handed out leaflets opposing the detention center, prompting pickup trucks stuck behind the procession to honk in frustration. Chesney Baldwin, a college student who lives in Hudson, was puzzled as he watched the marchers go by. Everyone here likes ICE, he said. This isn't Denver. Some residents and town leaders are tired of the scrutiny and say their normally staid town meetings have been hijacked by outsiders. 5 police officers were searching bags and providing security at a council meeting on Wednesday as dozens of demonstrators waited to make statements opposing the detention center. These people don't pay taxes here, Tracy Treverton, a Hudson resident, said as she stood in the entryway to Town Hall. We can't even get in here and conduct our own business. It's tearing our town apart. Protesters, in turn, have accused Hudson of trying to stifle open debate by limiting public comments. The meeting last week grew so heated that the mayor abruptly adjourned it, prompting even more outrage. Kerry Shackley, a longtime resident and member of Hudson's Planning Commission, walked away shaking his head. He said he opposed the detention center, which he characterized as a travesty, but he also felt for the besieged town government. They've been through the ringer, he said. I ran for council. Thank God I lost. I didn't need to sit through all of this. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the front section of the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Even with a new lead investor, Live Golf is facing a very fluid future. By Ian O'Connor, The Athletic. Bedminster, New Jersey. Scott O'Neill was the man dressed in black trying to nurse Live Golf out of hospice care. He was walking and talking last week about this Hail Mary he launched 70 miles north of Philadelphia, where his sporting life just came full circle. Before O'Neill was Liv's chief executive, he held the same role for the Philadelphia 76ers during the franchise's infamous rebuilding phase known as the Process. Before that, he was the president of Madison Square Garden, who, on behalf of the New York Knicks in 2010, personally recruited a free agent named LeBron James, who is now teaming in Philadelphia with the last active remnant of the process, Joel Embiid. So while heading off to play with some money guys in his New York Events Pro-Am at Trump Bedminster, O'Neill was swearing his experience in the big leagues made him the perfect choice to save LIV from itself. "This is the fun part of it," he said. "This isn't accidental. This is what I do. This is what I seek out." O'Neill had just announced he had found a lead investor whose support would allow LIV to exist beyond 2026. Never mind that the Golf League's June tournament in New Orleans was canceled, that its team championship event in Michigan later this month was expected to be canceled, and its most recent event winner, Lucas Herbert, admitted his manager had talks with the PGA Tour about a return. O'Neill was in a cheery mood while saying he had an investor he declined to identify, offering an amount he declined to reveal. The term sheet was signed with a goal of closing the deal next month, and in a situation the LIV chief executive described as very fluid, two things are clear. A lot of unnerving developments can occur in the very fluid days between now and September. This new benefactor won't remotely approach the fantasy golf funding of Saudi Arabia's $1 trillion public investment fund, which, by bailing on LIV in the spring, reminded the world that there are only so many billions the nation is willing to waste on a sports-washing whim that was never going to fly. LIV Golf declared a small victory at Bedminster, and yet the fight was officially lost the day the investment fund's involvement went poof. It's hard to believe that 3 years ago, the PGA Tour Commissioner Jay Monahan, who eventually went poof too, and the fund's governor, Yasir Al-Rumayyan, appeared on CNBC to announce a shocking merger, including the DP World Tour, that felt more like a surrender. The PGA Tour conceded it couldn't win a financial arms race against a determined opponent with seemingly unlimited funds. After shamelessly weaponizing the grief of 911 families, Monahan showed the tour's real issue with LIV. It merely feared the competition and tried cutting his own deal with the Saudis. But that agreement was never consummated, allowing the PGA Tour to find more agreeable partners in the Sports Strategic Group, which committed an investment of up to $3 billion that created the for-profit PGA Tour enterprises and made LIV a lot less necessary. O'Neill, who replaced Greg Norman 19 months ago, is now the last man standing between LIV's borderline irrelevance and outright extinction. On Wednesday, he claimed he wasn't done throwing punches. "It's a really exciting day," he said. "The chance to get to steward a league where it's a majority owned by players, which has never been done before in the history of sports, is more than special." Equity offers in a floundering business aren't often attractive to megastars who were only initially lured by guaranteed 9-figure contracts, and two of those stars, Bryson DeChambeau and Jon Rahm, are must-have assets for LIV to survive in any meaningful form. Rahm is owed a ton of cash, and the Financial Times reported that PIF is considering paying off contracts at a discount. We'll see. DeChambeau? He is about to become golf's first LeBron, a free agent worthy of a frenzy. DeChambeau's people can market his choice between LIV, a return to the PGA Tour, and life as a full-time content creator. Like and subscribe to Watch the Decision. But back when he ran Madison Square Garden, O'Neill was a major part of the Knicks presentation team that met with King James in Cleveland and, among other things, tried selling him on the idea that he would earn hundreds of millions more off the court in New York than anywhere else. O'Neill had a second meeting with the current Knicks president, Leon Rose, then LeBron's agent, in an attempt to improve New York's long shot bid. It failed. O'Neill can't afford to fail with DeChambeau or it's lights out. As it stands now, LIV has a major footprint in Australia and South Africa, a relatively healthy presence in the United Kingdom. 50,000 on-site fans watched Herbert shoot 30 under at LIV Golf UK with DeChambeau in the mix, and a tiny one in the United States that will become all but invisible if DeChambeau bolts. Asked about the importance of retaining DeChambeau and Rahm, O'Neill said, "I think I'd be remiss in saying that they're not only two of the biggest, best golfers on the planet, but I think they're some of the biggest stars in sports, let alone golf. Would certainly love to have them come along for the ride." In the end, there is no need to root for LIV's demise, especially since the moral argument against it, the Saudi backing, is now out of the picture. If the league is reduced to a parade of fading 40-somethings who want to play 10 team-centric events a season while bouncing from continent to continent, what's the harm in that? More golf is better than less golf on a grow-the-game level. And maybe O'Neill gets a little lucky and some of LIV's promising young golfers stick around. Maybe Cameron Smith does the same and keeps Australia a LIV hotbed. Maybe DeChambeau, the ultimate unconventional thinker, is the LIV loyalist he suggested he was by leading last week's players-only pep rally. He might just be the kind of guy to tell the PGA Tour to go to stuff their returning member penalties and go check the YouTube subscribers scoreboard. 2.8 million for Bryson, 1.75 million for the PGA Tour's official channel. But the smarter bet says there are too many unanswered questions about the money, the investors, the loss of the Asian Tour affiliation, world ranking points, and everything else for the stars to stay in place. And that's a big problem O'Neill won't be able to solve. Either way, the LIV chief executive said his past will inform his future. O'Neill spoke of his role in the billion-dollar bet on the renovation of Madison Square Garden. He spoke of the former Sixers general manager Sam Hinkie and his trust in the process, and how that experience seems so similar to this one with LIV. He spoke of his league playing through 2030. "Don't count us out," O'Neill said. The facts make it awfully hard not to. Experts say symptoms of cyclospora can return even after treatment. By Caroline Hopkins-Lugsbosky and Danny Bloom. 2 weeks after Angie Onofre thought she had finally recovered from the worst intestinal illness of her life, she was snacking on popcorn when she felt a familiar urge to run to the bathroom. "Immediately, I'm like, oh no," said Miss Onofre, 25, an IT intern in Brooklyn. The severe diarrhea she thought had been cured with the antibiotic Bactrim was back with a vengeance. Her symptoms got so bad that she went to the hospital, where a second cyclospora test confirmed that the parasite was still in her stool, and she received IV fluids to rehydrate her. In the midst of the worst cyclospora outbreak in U.S. history, health experts are grappling with how this parasite, which is spread through food or water contaminated with human feces, behaves in the gut. Before the latest surge in infections, it has been rare to have cyclospora outbreaks at anywhere near this scale in the United States. As a result, there has been little research on how a typical infection behaves. What is clear, health experts say, is that the symptoms can wax and wane, sometimes repeatedly over weeks. That can be quite disturbing for patients, said Dr. Roy Golick, Chief of Infectious Diseases at Weill Cornell Medicine. They think they're getting better, and then boom, it comes back again. Brittany Leone, 31, a nurse in Pittsburgh, said a cyclospora infection hit her out of nowhere on July 13th. She had just finished dinner with her husband when she lurched toward the bathroom. For 5 days, she said she stayed more or less anchored to the toilet, able to eat only popsicles and toast. When the symptoms faded, she celebrated by ordering Italian wedding soup. Less than an hour after eating, she said, it all started again. She endured another week of symptoms that came and went, including a resurgence of diarrhea. About 2 weeks after her initial symptoms, she got an antibiotic and quickly started to feel better. She's still weak, she said, as if her limbs are too heavy and her head feels foggy. She took a leave of absence from work on her doctor's recommendation, but she has been free of diarrhea since she started treatment. Since 2016, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has reported an average of about 2,800 cyclospora cases per year in the United States. In 2026, the agency confirmed around 10,400 cases since May 1st and is investigating more than 12,000 additional cases in states across the country. Dr. Corey Fisher, a family medicine physician with the Cleveland Clinic in Ohio, said he didn't have a good sense of how often cyclospora symptoms recur. During a typical year, he said, he sees cyclospora patients almost never. This summer, he's treated about 24 of them. Cyclospora infections can vary in duration and severity, Dr. Gulick said. Some people fight off the parasite without treatment and with minimal symptoms. Other people end up with diarrhea, either constant or intermittent, for more than a month. On average, symptoms last about 3 weeks without treatment, Dr. Gulick said, although antibiotics can shorten the duration. There isn't a formal definition for what counts as a relapse or clarity on how to differentiate a relapse from the typical ebb and flow of symptoms. When people do have relapsing symptoms, it's not always clear why, Dr. Gulick said. In one small study published in 2011, researchers in Quebec found that among 100 people who caught cyclospora during an outbreak there in 2005, 25 of those patients had symptoms that returned after, or at least 3 days, without diarrhea. On average, they relapsed twice within a 3-month period. The patients with recurrences included those who did and did not receive antibiotics. For some people, recurring symptoms may be the result of an infection that never cleared, said Dr. Anurag Malani, an epidemiologist at Trinity Health Ann Arbor Hospital in Michigan. Anyone can have a lingering infection, but in his experience, that's been more typical in older adults or those with compromised immune systems. People who don't finish the full course of antibiotics also risk recurring symptoms, said Dr. Alexander Chow. If people feel the drug is working after a day or two, they may decide to stop taking it. A bad idea, since that could leave residual parasite behind. For some people, a relapse in symptoms might be the result of another infection, meaning they ate contaminated food again. People don't develop immunity to the parasite the same way they do for some viruses, said Dr. Linda Yancey. The parasite invades cells in the intestinal lining, not in tissues deeper in the body, where it would set off the production of antibodies. It is entirely possible to have a case of cyclospora, get over it, get better, get reinfected, and get another case of cyclospora. It is also possible that what seems like a return of cyclospora might instead be a lingering complication, like post-infectious irritable bowel syndrome. For some, the recurring symptoms have helped them realize that they need treatment to feel better. Jill Woolley was initially convinced that her diarrhea, chills, and body aches were from a norovirus infection. After spending 2 days in bed, unable to eat, she started to feel better, still nauseated but able to work. A week after her first symptoms, she traveled to Maine for vacation. The day she got there, her symptoms, which included debilitating stomach cramps, flared again. She had read about cyclospora in the news, so she called her doctor, who recommended an antibiotic based on her symptoms. Soon after she started the medication, she felt better. She's been able to work out again and to feel like her life is back to normal. I was lucky, she said. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the August 9th issue of the front section of the New York Times. We read from the front section of the New York Times every Sunday at 1 p.m. Your reader has been Kathy. Thank you for listening.
Coming up next in the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, we have a reading of the New York Times opinion page. Following that at 3 o'clock, the New York Times Arts and Leisure, and at 4 o'clock, a rebroadcast of this morning's Buffalo News. Radio Reading mails out a large print program schedule to our listeners every other month. If you have not received a Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service large print program schedule in the mail, please call us at 716-821-5555. We will make sure that you receive one every other month. A Braille version of the schedule is also available upon request. Our number again is 716-821-5555. The following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or have another print disability, which